Hi everybody, my name's Dan. I'm a chess enthusiast and I've decided to start posting videos of my own chess games to YouTube. I'm doing this just to get some feedback from other players on analysis and that type of stuff. Um, I usually play on the free internet chess server, and this is a game that we're going to look at for my first video that I played over a year ago. It was a blitz game. It was 10-minute blitz, which is what I usually play because 5 minutes for me is just a little too fast. Um, and I just want to say at the very beginning that for the analysis of these videos and all videos that I do not use any chess engines. Um, I don't use Ribka. I don't use Crafty. I don't use anything. I just look at the games and I analyze them myself. The reason I do this is because I'm a little old school and I prefer to analyze the games as the greats did. From Morphy to Steinitz to Botvinnik to Fischer, none of them had high-powered chess engines to help them analyze their own games. They all had to do it using their own wits, and that's what I want to do because when you play over the board or online, you can't use chess engines. So I'm just trying to improve my own play by myself without the use of high-powered chess engines. I will include the PGN for these games in the comments uh, area for all of these videos. So if any of you want to crunch these games yourselves, you're welcome to. Any comments that you have are also welcome. And let's get started with this game. So I open with the English opening, which I usually play just because I don't see it very often in internet play. I feel like I catch some people off guard um, with it sometimes. This is not going to be a video on the English opening, but I will say very quickly that one of the goals of the English opening is to attack the center immediately, but from the flank. Um, Also, it's very flexible. What I usually do is I transpose into the King's Indian attack setup, or you can push pawns forward with ease. It's a pretty flexible opening. It's one that I like to use very often. So c4 is the English opening. My opponent replies d6, a very passive opening. I don't know if he just didn't know how to play this opening or what. Usually, what you see is either the mirrored variation, which is where your opponent mirrors you for as long as he can. So he would push pawn to c5, knight c3, knight c6, pawn, let's say e5, pawn e4, pawn e5, basically mirroring what you do. Or he will push e5 immediately. But this player did not do this. Like I said, he had kind of a passive opening. So he played d6. I immediately played d4, pushing into the center. He played e6, again, passive move, maybe pushing forward a little harder would have been a better move for him. I play knight c3. He plays knight f6. I play knight f3. Now he pushes to d5. He can hold the center if he wants to, because he has the queen, the pawn, and the knight all bearing down on the d5 square. Um, so he can maintain a pawn in the center if he wants to. Here, though, I make a mistake. Maybe not a mistake, but just not a very good move. I go for g3, which is getting ready to fianchetto my bishop. Like I said, I usually transpose into a King's Indian setup after the English opening. What this does, though, is it allows my opponent to come in and capture on c4. I don't go down a pawn, though. I can fork the king with my queen, hitting check on a4. I can fork the king and the pawn, and no matter how he replies, he's not going to be able to keep that pawn advantage that he has. In the game, what he does is he replies c6, and I grab the pawn on c4. But the reason that I don't like this very much is because my queen is out early in the opening, and that's one of the uh, basic rules of chess. One of the first things you learn is not to bring your queen out too early. It can be chased around the board quite easily with tempo. I would not do this now. Now, what I would do is I would capture into the center, because what this is doing is taking away one of his center pawns. He still doesn't have this c pawn moved to c6. So if he's going to capture, he has to use either his knight or his other center pawn. But I still have my two center pawns. So I think a better move for me would have been to capture. If he recaptures, I can do one of two moves. I can push forward and give the bishop access along this diagonal. Play could continue as follows. If he brings his bishop down, I would block with my bishop to get out of the pin immediately. He would castle. I would play my bishop up. He plays knight to c6. I castle. This is a very, very workable setup. I'm a little bit farther ahead in development, but I don't see any major advantages for any side at this point. One other thing that I could have done is once he captures with his knight, say he chooses to do that, I can immediately push to e4. And if he captures with his knight on c3, I can capture with my pawn on c3. And now I have a pawn chain extending through the center of the board. I feel like this is a very solid pawn structure. This is also pretty easy to work with. I can still fianchetto if I want to. I can bring my bishop out. I'm one move away from castling, as is my opponent. I feel like this would have been also a very workable setup. But in the game, I fianchettoed. He captured. I forked. He blocked. I recaptured. He brings his bishop out, getting ready to castle. I bring my bishop out. He brings his knight on b to d7. What this is doing is getting ready to come to b6 and hit my queen with tempo. But first I decide to castle. Then he hits my queen, so I fall back to d3. And then he plays knight on b to d5. And at this point, I decide to just capture the knight, because if I leave it sitting there, it's going to be able to come to b4, hit my queen again with tempo. I don't want to have to move my queen any more than I absolutely have to with tempo. So I take the knight. Unfortunately, what this does is that now, since he has blocked with his c-pawn the check that I hit him with earlier, he's able to recapture into the center, and he is able to maintain his center pawns. So one of the main advantages of the English opening, as I said in the beginning, is that you attack the center from the flank. But in this game, I wasn't very careful, and that flanking attack that I had in the beginning was actually negated later on, as you see here. So play continues. I played b3. He castles. I play bishop to b2. Double fianchetto setup, not something you see too regularly, but I like this because it's supporting the pawn in the center on d4, and it's carving into the king side castle position. He plays h6. I think this is kind of a prophylactic move. While there are no major threats in the area at this point in time, he might as well give himself a flight square before it becomes too much of an issue. Of course, with my queen sitting on d3, he can't make use of that square, but he's not going to need to make use of it anytime soon. So that was his move. I played knight to e5. And then he decides to get his pawn moving on the queen side. So he plays a6. I play f4 to give support to the knight sitting on e5. This also kind of opens up the diagonal access for my king. It's not an issue, and it doesn't become an issue in this game. But still, I think looking back on this now, I would have played a different move. Perhaps pawn to f3, getting ready to thrust forward and break up the center, something like that. I think probably would have been a better move. But nonetheless, play continues, and my opponent doesn't make a blunder, but it is kind of a mistake. He plays pawn to b5, and what this does is it creates a hole in the black position. My knight is able to jump in and fork the queen and the bishop. Now, usually players do not want to give up bishops for knights if they don't have to, because it is easier to open up a position than it is to close a position. And knights function better in closed positions, bishops function better in open positions. So I was able to trade off the knight for the bishop. However, if we go back here, if we look at this position, looking at it now, I'm not quite sure that this was really necessary. His his dark square bishop is not doing a whole lot of anything. I have pretty good black square control on the king side, and I've got this black square bishop, this dark square bishop here. His bishop is kind of just sitting there, not really doing anything, whereas my knight is very well perched. It could potentially be kicked off by the f pawn from black, but for the moment anyway, that's not that big of an issue. So I kind of feel like now I exchanged a good piece for a bad piece, but at the same time, it was probably not entirely a bad move because, as I said before, I had opened up this diagonal, but now my opponent doesn't have a dark square bishop with which to harass me and give me major headaches. So he recaptures. I play pawn to e4. Looking at this now, this is definitely a mistake for the following reason. What my opponent could do is capture. I'm forced to recapture with the bishop. One reason why this is not particularly good is because when you fianchetto on the king side, the light square bishop becomes very, very important and powerful. It's guarding the light squares on the king side. But because of this pawn push, I was basically forced to recapture with my bishop or to move my queen with tempo, and now my opponent has a passed pawn. Not a good position to be in, so I'm forced to recapture. He captures with his knight, I recapture with the queen. He moves the bishop onto b7, and now all of a sudden I have two open diagonals leading into my kingside position. If he's ever able to get his queen over onto this side of the board, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Right now, my queen is under attack, so I have to fall back somewhere. This is definitely a messy position. And this is all stems from the move that I played right here, pawn push to e4. I think a better move would have been just moving my rook over to the open file, to the open c file, just gaining control of the c file, improving my position a little bit, waiting for him to do something else. This would have been a much better move, I think. However, in the game, he did not see that line that I took us down just a minute ago. Instead, he immediately played bishop to b7. Maybe he was thinking of protecting his center pawn, but what this allows me to do is push forward with my pawn, and I am able to kick his knight away from its post. What it does is it falls back to d7, but unfortunately, because of a result of that move, his knight is pretty much boxed out of the game. It can't really come to the square on c5 because it will be captured. If it comes to b6, it could maybe potentially come to a4 and or c4, except that I have this pawn sitting here on b3 controlling both of those squares. So the knight pretty much becomes a non-factor at this point. So I am actually going to stop this video here. You're welcome to watch part 2, and I will see you later.